The Spartans, the only soldiers from antiquity whose name still stands for the perfect warrior over 2,500 years later. Spartans were citizen soldiers of the Greek city-state of Sparta. Their training began at just 7 years old in the agoge, a brutal system of controlled starvation, relentless combat, and survival in the wild. Only the strongest boys survived to age 20, earning the status of full-fledged hoplites. They lived in barracks until age 30, training every day, while their wives managed the household and estates. Their lives were entirely dedicated to war. For nearly 200 years, Sparta dominated Greece thanks to tactical mastery, most famously at the Battle of Thermopylae in 480 BC. There, 300 Spartans and 700 allies held off 150,000 Persian soldiers for 3 days, killing around 20,000 attackers before finally being overwhelmed. That casualty ratio 1 Spartan for every 95 Persians is nearly impossible in ancient warfare. Their formation was nearly impenetrable, overlapping shields, 2.5-meter spears, and absolute discipline. They never retreated. But Sparta had a critical weakness: a tiny citizen population. Only the sons of full citizens could become Spartans. At the Battle of Leuctra in 371 BC, they lost 400 elite warriors, and the citizen soldier population never recovered. Within a century, it plummeted from 8,000 to less than 1,000. Sparta's extreme eugenics and strict exclusivity ultimately undermined the society they built. They proved that extreme training creates elite soldiers, but a society built entirely on war eventually runs out of warriors. The Persian Immortals, the only military unit in history to maintain exactly 10,000 men at all times. The Immortals were the elite guard of the Achaemenid Persian Empire. They earned the name Immortals because whenever a soldier died or was wounded, he was immediately replaced, keeping the force at a constant 10,000 men. They wore scale armor, carried wicker shields covered with leather, used short spears, and shot composite bows. Their uniforms were brightly colored and adorned with gold, and soldiers were selected from across the empire based purely on military skill. The Immortals marched across the largest empire the ancient world had ever seen, from India to Greece, Egypt to Central Asia, always traveling with luxury baggage, servants, and personal harems. They led every Persian army at Thermopylae, and were the ones who finally flanked the Spartans after 3 days. They defeated Babylonians, Lydians, Egyptians, and Ionian Greeks, and directly protected the King of Kings. Yet the Immortals had a major vulnerability. Their wicker shields couldn't withstand Greek spears, and their scale armor was weaker than solid bronze. At the Battle of Plataea, this weakness proved fatal. They were massacred by Greek hoplites. The Persian Immortals' short spears were completely ineffective against 2.5-meter pikes, and they were utterly destroyed by Alexander the Great at Issus and Gaugamela. This shows that numbers and morale alone can't overcome superior technology. The Immortals proved that psychology matters just as much as tactics, but no legendary name can make up for proper equipment. Next up, the Roman Legionaries, the soldiers who transformed Rome from a city-state into an empire that lasted 500 years. A legionary was the backbone of the Roman army, composed of citizens serving for 25 years. Their training was brutal: 30-kilometer marches carrying 40 kilograms of gear, daily hand-to-hand combat, and building fortifications. They wore larica segmentata, wielded the gladius, pilum, and scutum, a large rectangular shield. But legionaries were more than just fighters. They were engineers, constructing roads, bridges, aqueducts, and forts. Roman legions conquered territories from Britain to Egypt, Spain to Mesopotamia. A single legion of 5,000 men could defeat armies of 50,000 barbarians through discipline, superior equipment, and flexible tactics. During campaigns, they built complete forts every night, walls, towers, and trenches. They fought in the famous testudo tortoise formation, nearly impervious to arrows. Using just 8 legions, Julius Caesar conquered all of Gaul, facing millions of Celts. But this military machine had a cost. Only Roman citizens could serve, and when Rome started recruiting barbarians in the 4th century, discipline collapsed. Professional legionaries were expensive, paid with land and gold. When the empire couldn't sustain them financially, the legions fragmented into private armies controlled by generals. The lesson? Even the perfect military system needs resources to survive. Organization and engineering can beat raw bravery, but money and logistics are essential. Finally, the Mubarzan elite duelists of medieval Islamic armies who challenged enemies to single combat in front of thousands. The Arabic term means those who step forward for battle. Before clashes, Mubarzan would ride out, shouting challenges, and the enemy would send their champion to fight. Entire armies watched. They were armed with sword, lance, full armor, and rode fast Arabian horses. These duels could decide battles before they even began. At the Battle of Yarmouk, Byzantine General Vahan's best champion was killed within seconds by Mubarzan Khalid al-Walid. At Hattin, Saladin used champions to break Crusader morale. During the Crusades, Frankish knights often refused to fight Mubarzan, knowing that losing a single champion could trigger mass desertion. The Mubarzan system had a critical weakness. It relied entirely on mutual honor. Once European armies started using crossbows and longbows, mounted champions became easy targets. At the Battle of Ars, Richard the Lionheart even instructed archers to specifically aim at the Mubarzan, breaking traditional combat rules. Later, Mongol guerrilla tactics ignored duels entirely, relying on gunpowder and muskets. By the 16th century, champion duels had become obsolete. The Mubarzan disappeared as war stopped being personal. Next up, war elephants, the tanks of the ancient world, capable of spreading sheer terror just by appearing on the battlefield. These were trained Indian elephants, outfitted for combat. They carried towers with 4 to 6 archers, weighed around 5 tons, and stood about 3 meters tall. Their armor was made of metal or hardened leather, and bronze blades were fixed to their tusks. Handlers controlled them with hooks behind the ears. Carthaginians, Persians, Indians, and Greeks all used them. Elephants caused unmatched psychological fear. At Hydaspes, Porus' 200 elephants inflicted thousands of Macedonian casualties. Hannibal famously crossed the Alps with 37 elephants, terrifying the Romans at Trebia. But elephants had serious weaknesses. They were vulnerable to fire and flaming arrows, could panic easily, and often trampled their own troops in retreat. At Zama, 202 BC, Scipio cleverly created corridors in his ranks, letting Hannibal's elephants charge harmlessly through. In India, Alexander countered elephants using 6-meter sarissas to keep them at a distance. War elephants proved that psychological weapons only work once, and that logistics outweigh raw power. Finally, the Vikings, the warriors whose raids terrified Europe so much that people prayed, "God, deliver us from the fury of the Northmen." Vikings were Scandinavians, Norwegians, Swedes, and Danes who raided Europe from 793 to 1066 AD. They were more than warriors, traders, explorers, and settlers, armed with axes, swords, spears, and round shields. Their secret weapon was naval mobility. Their longships could sail both oceans and shallow rivers, allowing them to strike without warning, raid coastal monasteries, loot, and disappear before local armies could react. Vikings conquered England, Danelaw, Normandy, and Sicily, established trade routes to Constantinople, and even reached North America 500 years before Columbus. The great heathen army of 3,000 Vikings conquered 4 of 5 Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. They founded Dublin, Kiev, and Novgorod. Their speed and mobility were unmatched, even raiding Muslim Seville and Christian Paris in the same campaign. Entire kingdoms paid Danegeld just to make them leave. However, Vikings had a major limitation. They couldn't hold territory. They were brilliant raiders, but poor administrators. Attempts to rule England failed. Alfred the Great defeated them by building fortress networks. When they settled in Normandy, they quickly assimilated into French culture within 2 generations. By 1000 to 1100 AD, the Christianization of Scandinavia ended the era of the pagan warrior culture. The Viking Age didn't end in defeat, it ended in transformation. The Berserkers were Viking warriors who entered a near-psychotic rage in battle. Immune to pain, superhumanly strong, and uncontrollable, they even bit their shields. The name comes from bear, and they wore bear or wolf pelts into combat. Before fighting, they entered altered states through rituals, hallucinogenic mushrooms, or hyperventilation. In this trance, they charged without formation, screamed, sometimes fought naked, and were nearly unstoppable. After battle, however, the Berserkers would collapse into deep exhaustion and depression. They served as royal bodyguards and led assaults. In the saga of Ragnar Kraki, 12 Berserkers defended a king against hundreds. Medieval accounts describe Berserkers killing 10 to 20 men each before succumbing. At Stamford Bridge, a single Berserker held a bridge against the English, killing 40 men before being speared from below. Yet Berserkers were essentially single-use weapons. After their trance, they were vulnerable, disobedient, and sometimes attacked allies. As Vikings converted to Christianity, Berserkers were outlawed. The Icelandic ban in 1123 formally ended their existence. Society realized that psychotic warriors couldn't fit within structured armies, and they vanished after the Viking Age. Then there were the Jæms Vikings, the only Viking military order with a written code of conduct and monastic-style discipline. Based in Jæmsborg, exact location unknown, likely Pomerania, they were founded in the 10th century and accepted only warriors aged 18 to 50 who passed a combat test. They lived communally in a fortress with no families and followed strict rules. No fear, no retreat, no showing wounds, and vengeance for fallen brothers was mandatory. Loot was shared equally. The Jæms Vikings were elite mercenaries, with kings paying gold for their services. They fought in every major Nordic battle of the 10th and 11th centuries. At the Battle of Hjørungavr, 986, 60 Jæms Viking ships faced 180 Norwegian ships. They lost, but fought to the last man without surrender. At the Battle of Forisvellir, 990, they helped Eric the Victorious conquer Sweden. They became legendary for never retreating, and when captured, they demanded execution, often laughing in the face of death, as sagas recount. Yet the Jæms Vikings mysteriously disappeared in the 12th century. Theories suggest their fortress was destroyed by storms, annihilated in battle due to their suicidal code, or absorbed into Christian knightly orders. Their fortress has never been founded, may be legendary, but their influence was real. They inspired later medieval military orders such as the Templars and Teutonic Knights. They showed that Vikings could be disciplined warriors on par with the Romans. Next, the Templars, the warrior monks, who not only fought, but also created early banking systems before being executed for heresy. The Knights Templar were a Catholic military order founded in 1119 to protect pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land. They took strict vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, wearing white mantles adorned with red crosses. Their ranks included knights, nobles, sergeants, commoners, and chaplains. They built fortresses across Europe and the Middle East, and at their height, numbered 20,000 members, controlling 870 castles and strongholds. On the battlefield, they were elite fighters of the Crusades. At Montgisard in 1177, just 500 Templars and 3,000 Crusaders defeated 26,000 of Saladin's troops. They never surrendered, fought to the last man, and their code forbade ransom or retreat without orders. The Templars were the vanguard in every Crusader battle. But they weren't just warriors, they were innovators. They created an early banking system. Pilgrims could deposit money in Paris, get a credit note, and withdraw funds in Jerusalem. This financial power made them incredibly influential, but also dangerous. In 1307, King Philip IV of France, who owed them huge sums, ordered the arrest of all Templars in France, accusing them of heresy, idolatry, and sodomy. The Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, was burned at the stake in 1314, reportedly cursing the Pope and the king as he died, both of whom died within months. The Pope dissolved the order in 1312, and the Templar fortune disappeared, though legends of hidden treasure persist to this day. Then there were the samurai, the only warriors who practiced ritual suicide if dishonored, whose descendants ruled Japan for 700 years. Samurai were the warrior class of feudal Japan, following Bushido, a strict code emphasizing loyalty, discipline, and honor even over life itself. Trained from childhood in swordsmanship, archery, spearfighting, and hand-to-hand combat, they wore yoroi armor, crafted from metal plates laced with silk cords. They served daimyo, their feudal lords, without question. But samurai were more than fighters. They were administrators, poets, and tea masters. They dominated Japan for centuries through military skill and rigid social hierarchy. At the Battle of Sekigahara, 160,000 samurai clashed for control of Japan, with Tokugawa Ieyasu emerging victorious and founding a shogunate that lasted 268 years. Samurai also repelled the Mongol invasions of 1274 and 1281, aided by typhoons that gave rise to the legend of the Divine Wind. Legendary swordsmen like Miyamoto Musashi killed dozens in duels, embodying the deadly skill and discipline of the samurai. Bushido demanded seppuku if a samurai was captured or dishonored. But the samurai didn't end in battle. They were undone by modernization. During the Meiji Restoration, Japan abolished the samurai class, banned the carrying of swords, and created a modern conscript army. The samurai's final stand, the Satsuma Rebellion, was crushed by rifle-armed peasants. Around 40,000 traditional samurai died, and the rebel leader Sago Takamori committed seppuku. In the end, katanas couldn't defeat machine guns. 1,000-year warrior culture vanished in a single decade. Next, the Waffen-SS, the elite Nazi troops notorious for fanaticism and atrocities. The Waffen-SS was the military arm of the Nazi SS, formed in 1939 as Hitler's personal guard. Over time, it expanded to 38 divisions with 950,000 soldiers. Recruits had to meet strict standards: pure Aryan descent, minimum height of 1.78 meters, perfect teeth. They were better equipped than regular Wehrmacht units. Elite divisions like Leibstandart, Das Reich, and Totenkopf led every major campaign. Loyalty was to Hitler alone, not Germany. The Waffen-SS earned a fearsome reputation in combat. On the Eastern Front, SS divisions held lines when the Wehrmacht retreated. At Kursk, Leibstandart pushed 80 kilometers into Soviet defenses. In Normandy, the 12th SS Hitler Youth Division, made up of teenagers aged 16 to 18, held off the British for weeks, fighting to the death. 90% casualty rates were common, and captured SS troops were often executed on the spot by the Soviets. They were ideological fanatics, ready to die for the so-called master race. But the Waffen-SS were also war criminals. At Malmedy, they executed 84 American prisoners of war. The Totenkopf Division massacred 100 British POWs at Le Paratus, and units like the Einsatzgruppen murdered 1.5 million Jews. After the war, the Waffen-SS was declared a criminal organization at Nuremberg. Many members were executed or imprisoned, Finally, the Finnish snipers, ordinary citizens who became deadly warriors during the harshest winter of the 20th century. These were regular Finnish soldiers defending their homeland in the winter war against the Soviet Union. They had basic gear, a Mosin-Nagant rifle without a scope, skis, and white camouflage clothing. Their deep knowledge of Finnish forests and mastery of guerrilla tactics ambushes, night attacks, vanishing into the snow made them terrifying opponents, even in minus 40 degrees Celsius temperatures. Finland fielded 300,000 soldiers against a 1 million strong Soviet invasion. Yet Finnish snipers inflicted 5 to 7 Soviet casualties for every Finn lost. Their skill and tactics proved that knowledge, patience, and precision can outweigh sheer numbers. Statistically, it seems impossible in conventional warfare. Simo Häyhä, known as the White Death, killed 505 confirmed Soviet soldiers in just 100 days using only an iron sight rifle. The Soviets nicknamed the Finns White Ghosts. By the end of the Winter War, the Red Army had lost 700,000 troops killed, wounded, captured, or frozen, while Finland lost only 70,000. Soviet propaganda suffered a huge blow worldwide. But sheer numbers can't overcome geography forever. The Soviets poured in 1.5 million more soldiers, and Finland eventually ran out of ammunition and allies. They were forced to sign a treaty, ceding 11% of their territory, but crucially, they kept their independence, the only country Stalin invaded that remained free. During the Continuation War, Finland fought alongside Germany against the USSR, but refused to participate in atrocities. They later negotiated a separate peace, surviving between two superpowers. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Next up, Stalingrad. 2 million soldiers fighting for a single city over 5 brutal months of winter. The Battle of Stalingrad was the ultimate clash between German and Soviet forces.